Welcome to Isn't It Obvious, where things are obvious. That's going to be the intro.
That's going to be the intro forever now.
Right.
Welcome to Isn't It Obvious. I am your host, Sera, and Phil and Micah are here too. My topic for the day, and I apologize in advance because I'm saying this as a person without children. So, sorry, Phil, and the editor. But, really this doesn't apply to you, I feel. Or anyone at this moment, maybe, because it's the pandemic still. Right, so isn't it obvious that children should not be allowed in restaurants or other places until they have learned how to not disturb people?
Where are they supposed to learn that life skill?
At home.
How does at home allow you to interact with strangers?
No, at the dinner table, it should be it's quiet time. We're going to focus on eating and quiet conversation, and
But
that's how we act at the dinner table.
How does that compensate for when your child is out in the world and they see something that they are not used to and are curious about?
You still behave because we are at a dinner table, and that's how you act at a dinner table. I swear to God, if I have to see your gross, food-covered, drooling child running around the whatever nice restaurant I happen to be at during a non-pandemic times, and they're just they're getting their greasy, gross hands all over people's stuff, that's disgusting. And it's and there was this one time, it was at it was this nice little Mexican restaurant, and I was going there to have lunch, and some woman had brought her baby into the restaurant, and I'm trying to talk to my friend who's sitting, or maybe it was a coworker, I can't remember. I think it was during lunch, but I think I met a friend there or something. And I'm trying to talk to this person, and we can't hear each other over the screams of this wailing baby. And I'm just could you just, I don't know, get up and take your child to the restroom? Because it's a baby, right? It's not you can just hush your child. You can't just hush a baby. You gotta do something. But just letting it cry in the restaurant, could you just take your fucking child and, if it's not 30 below outside, take it outside or into the restroom or something with a door where you can have some privacy and you're not disturbing other guests.
What about an airplane?
Is that so much to ask? Oh my God.
Or a bus.
That's another thing. Can we have child-free airplanes? Can we just have you just pay a premium? You can go ride coach with the children and it'd be normal flight class.
Why is coach where children belong?
Or first class, whatever, but it's a normal flight, right? And then you could have child-free flights where they're just, they're exorbitantly expensive, but they're fucking quiet. No children.
Wait, hold on. So you think that a 30-year-old who
I
can
would
drink
pay.
at the airport is more well-behaved than a child?
Yes, generally. I'm not saying all children. I'm just saying there are.
So you're making
but not
a
all
blanket
30-year-olds
statement
either.
for something that should have a lot of stipulations to it.
I'm making a blanket statement with the stipulations already in it. Children should not be allowed in restaurants or other places.
That's your blanket
until
statement.
They learn how
the
to
reason for that is they are
obnoxious when they are
when
they're
they
misbehaving.
are not obnoxious adults. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy that the ageism
They also shouldn't be allowed.
Relevant.
They also shouldn't be allowed. They should be asked to leave if they're going to make a fucking scene.
But they're paying customers.
No, they're not.
Yes,
they're looking for handouts is what they're looking for. They're not paying anything. They're sitting there throwing a fit like a goddamn toddler, wanting to see the manager because they feel disrespected.
Karen, please calm down. I think Phil has a point.
I agree with the premise that children are Russian roulette. You could have a good child or train them or teach them or whatever it is so that they go to a restaurant and they're not going to act like they're going to start screaming and throwing food around and just being a menace, maybe 5 out of 6 times. And that's kind of where it goes, because if you don't take them and get them used to an environment that they're unaware of originally, there's a lot of power plays that go on, especially with toddlers. The problem though is that people don't remember all of the times where people have kids with them at restaurants and that they behave well because it's just background noise. But we all remember the time where there's a screaming baby or a screaming toddler that's just not acting well at all. But at that age, anything could really set them off. So then the question is, I do feel very bad when it's a situation where I see parents struggle with their kids and the kids are just going to be okay, well, now I'm just going to
have a meltdown
right
in
now.
the middle of this. And I've been that kid, man. I've had a meltdown in a mall, but did my mother just let me sit and cry. No, she picked me up and she took me out and we left.
Yeah,
But that
Because
doesn't mean
it's
that happened to you, that all kids should be banned from said premises.
or that parents
I'm not
react the same
saying,
way.
okay, maybe I did say banned, but like, I don't think...
You said child-free, which means that under no situations should children be allowed into this space.
No, I said child-free in relation to into flights. That would be just, there would not be children allowed
also,
on flights.
the children not
specific
at
types,
restaurants.
but
You had
that-
one bad
no,
happy hour
no.
experience.
No, I'm not saying they can't necessarily go. They just need to be. But no, Phil makes a good point. Like, children are going to act the way they do, and sometimes you just don't know. So, like, they can be very well behaved most of the time, but then you put them into a situation and something sets them off.
Yeah.
And, you know, you only have so much control because children are autonomous. They are people. You know, they're going to have their own emotions.
So
and
you
stuff.
should
But-
expose those future people to different
Sure,
circumstances, so they
But what
learn.
I'm saying is, yeah, okay, so they learn, and if they act out, they should be removed. They should have to get up and leave.
So you're saying a patron to a restaurant should just up and leave if a child is acting out and should not get their product that they purchased at said establishment?
Oh, they can get their product, but they have to, like, take their child out. Maybe take them to the restroom for a minute. Let them have their, take them outside, take them in the car, like, whatever. And if they had already ordered stuff, like, I'm assuming, of course, that this is not a single parent and that this is, like, two parents here. So I don't know what they would do in a situation.
I think that's a
where it was
gross
single
assumption.
parent. But in a situation like that, you could have the one parent stay behind, pay the bill, collect the food, and go if they have to leave. Or if the child calms down, they can come back and sit down and behave.
So parents with kids should suffer the consequences of their
Of having
child
kids?
as an autonomous human being acting out in a situation of which autonomous human beings are at an establishment to partake in whatever they're offering.
But, like, you shouldn't be disturbing other customers either.
So what about the 25-year-old drunkard who's yelling at the bar?
They should also be escorted out of the premises. Forget that. We don't have to put up with that bullshit.
But you're saying
They're
extra
basically
scrutiny
toddlers.
needs to be applied to those people with children as opposed to adults that just act poorly.
No, I wasn't talking about adults who throw tantrums, but that one's a given. If you're gonna be an adult and you're gonna throw a tantrum in the middle of a restaurant or something, you will be thrown out. That's just obvious.
Is it obvious?
Right?
I've seen a lot of
Isn't it
tantrums that
obvious?
haven't had people being thrown out of a bar for their actions.
Well, they should have fucking been.
But that flies in the face of capitalism because you want customers.
I don't want those customers.
There's this also other problem too where, and I hate to say it this way, but like the family meal is becoming more and more difficult to arrange in modern times. So like, Sarah, you make a good point, of course, that like, well, how do you learn table manners? Probably at home, in theory. But, and for my case with the editor, it's a bit more balanced. Like, we are able to have dinner as a family most of the time all together. And, it's just a nice perk of working 9 to 5 and something like that. Not always, though. When the editor works, then that whole week is shot because she's on call. So then, we don't really have family dinners during those times. And it occurs to me that, like, even just sitting down to have a family dinner that's consistent is not the norm anymore, unless you kind of have like a husband goes out to work 1950s type of lifestyle. I'm not sure if it's the same for you guys, but like in me growing up, my mom worked third shift and my dad worked the early first shift, and that was just the way that life was. So they didn't really get to spend a lot of time together, and the only one time we did was the family dinner time, like right before my mom had to go to work and right after my dad just came back. And so that was kind of a time where we were supposed to learn our table manners. But with this kind of how expensive it is to raise a kid, daycare alone is probably close to college tuition, to be honest. It's just very strange because now 2 parents, in order to make it in this country, have to work, and that's been like that since the late 80s. I do have a lot of sympathy, especially for people who work part-time jobs that they don't have a fixed schedule and they have kids, and then they bring them, and then they're supposed to have this dinner. Their dinner as a family, when I see them, if they're not like this upper middle class people or whatever, like I imagine that this restaurant is a real treat for them. And so it does, in my head, I'm just kind of taking a tally of people I know that have like this type of both parents working and how hard it is to raise a family. It bothers me because this is a bigger problem. I mean, back when we were kids, I don't know what it was like for you guys, but how many of your friends and family had like a consistent dinner time? Maybe majority of the people, maybe yourselves included. I don't know if that trend is true anymore. And when I take a quick survey in my head of the families that I know that have kids that are like young ones. Both parents typically work. It
Well,
kind of sucks.
it depends on the shift. Like your parents barely managed to keep a consistent dinner time, right? Because they had like that one 2 or 3 hour period between that they could spend together as a family at the table and eat. My parents worked probably sometimes, like my dad I think worked a normal 8 hour shift. I think my mom worked a lot of 10-hour days. But generally, we had, growing up, dinner consistently up until about, I don't know, I think Sam and I were old enough to kind of like, we could kind of cook for ourselves by this point. And at that point, we just kind of, instead of eating at the table, we would eat like in the living room, or like it wasn't as formal of a dinner. It was more of a casual, we're just eating wherever we're comfortable sort of thing. Growing up originally when we were younger, it was definitely you sit at the table, you eat your food, and when you're done, you can, put your dishes in the sink. And it was like, it was like the questions like, how was your day? And that kind of, like it was a time to be a family. And I think that was, I don't know, I think that's actually pretty important growing up.
In Minnesota, they have free, maybe not free, but they have early childhood family education classes. I think that's like a few $100s per semester or something like that. And they teach the parents how to be parents. Maybe not teach, but they ask the parents questions about values and traditions, about what you want your kid to do, because now you're a new family. And lo and behold, many of the people in those classes are not single parents. They're two parents co-parenting together, typically married. Those questions about like, okay, describe your family childhood dinner situation, and then the editor would describe hers and I would describe mine, and then they would even ask, okay, draw on a piece of paper who sat where, who did what was how long did it take you, was there a TV there, was there a radio, what were you guys talking about? And then you can clearly see that there's a big difference between people, the editor included, and mine were very different. Who made all the food, who did the dishes, who set the tempo, who made, who did the meal plans. It was very clear that like the families that have a routine are the ones that that are more predictable. It's more stable for the kid. But I know people,
they're less likely to throw a tantrum at a restaurant.
And so there is this kind of classist problem here, is what I'm trying to get at, where people who work split shifts, or hey, I work at retail, so I don't know what my hours are, or I work at at the evening time, or I work second or third shift. It's like, well, that kind of sucks to be you. And so you take this time out, that you set aside to go to a nice restaurant, and your kids are not behaving the way that you would prefer, but it's because you don't have the luxury of setting up a simple thing as a standard dinner time, which back in the 50s and 60s was just taken for granted. And now it's like, well, because the cost of raising kids is so high, many parents struggle with, do I pay off my student loans, or do I have to pay for daycare? And making $10 an hour, it just isn't going to cut it to be able to pay for the mortgage and the rent and everything.
You can't live on $10 an hour.
So it's just,
you can't. You just can't. Not alone.
It just kind of goes into this like, well, shouldn't kids behave better? And we're looking at it from the lenses of when we were kids, and sometimes.
Well, I'm not saying kids should behave better. I just don't think parents should be bringing their children who aren't well behaved.
But if the parents don't have that type of constant change of routine, where if you're working 2 jobs because you can only have part-time things, and it's a lot of spaghetti and it's a lot of simple meals, but because of an empty shift and an extra bonus, you have an opportunity to go to a Mexican restaurant where you don't have to cook, and it's something you don't normally cook. And it is an event that is uncommon in your life because you're just trying to make shit work.
Mm-hmm.
Should you be punished because your child is acting out? Because it is as rare for your child as it is for you, the parent taking care of that child.
I wouldn't say punish.
You're saying
but
people have to leave. That's a punishment.
No, it was a choice. They had children. Sorry.
And they made a choice to be a patron at a restaurant that they are paying money to go to. They are meeting the requirement to go there.
So did all the other fucking people who are trying to eat there in peace. You gotta take that too.
But you also have empathy. You need to have empathy for other people as well.
Yeah. And if your kid is having a meltdown in the fucking restaurant, maybe you need to take that child out of that situation for fucking 5 minutes.
Do you know that child? Do you know the spasms?
I don't, but I don't want to. I also, you know what? I can tell you, if there's a fucking child having a meltdown for like 10 minutes in a restaurant, I'm gonna leave. I'm not gonna sit there and listen to it. Yes, I have empathy for the parents, and I know it's a fucking struggle, and maybe this was their one fucking night in 2 months that they were able to. But like, I'm sorry, just you also have to have empathy for the rest of the customers who are there trying to enjoy a meal in peace as well. I'm sorry if you have a difficult time trying to be a consistent parent, but you can still, if you have time to go out to eat, you have time, you can make an effort to teach your child how to behave at table. And yes, I recognize that there are times where your kids, you just can't predict them and they will just have a fucking meltdown maybe. But in that case, like, okay, it didn't work this time. You can try again another time. You can take your kid out of that situation and say, okay, well, that was a failure. We'll try again maybe next week. But this week isn't going to work. Or next month. You know, like, you'll have other opportunities in the future.
What if that experience you had was the exception to the rule for that child, and you just
Doesn't
caught them
matter.
on a bad night?
Yeah, that's what
Doesn't
I'm
matter.
talking about.
You take them out of that
The
situation.
Russian roulette of this too, and how often does this really occur? Which could, 5 out of 6 times. 1 out of 6 times, that's pretty often, to be honest. The other thing too that I wanted to mention is that I agree that if you have kids, there's gotta be some sense of like, you own this problem of how to teach a child not just to be a child, like a polite child, but to be a good grown-up when they get there, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's
I'm not expecting perfection, but yeah, put some effort into raising your
at
kid.
the same time, society doesn't really care about parents and kids to an extent. So like, we have no healthcare, we have no daycare, we have no pre-K, like we have no universal kindergarten, like pre-kindergarten, right? We don't really, unless you're in an affluent neighborhood, like if you have kids, you're pretty much fucked. And that's the
Yep.
way that we set up our tax
agree.
system. And this is the way that people,
Which I think is
this
bullshit.
is the way people vote for. This is how we want to spend our money, is on $1 trillion F-35 programs and like $0 on insulin for kids. Like this is what we want as a nation.
Which is bullshit, and they're
In
wrong.
the 90s, I was just watching this documentary just last night, which is very heartbreaking. They were filming the Milwaukee School District. In the 90s, they said half the kids don't have a parent to go to when they get home. Basically, both parents are out working. When the child goes home, they have to make their own food. They have to do their own homework. They have to do their own chores. They have to clean up themselves, and they go to bed. No parents to supervise them. No parents to make sure that they're checking up, like, because both parents have to work dead-end minimum wage jobs. And so then you have a nation of people saying something like, oh, well, you know what, if we have wages that are matched inflation from when the program started. I remember there was like a congressperson who said something like, well, I was able to pay for my college with minimum wage back in the 60s or 70s. And it's like, well, good for you, pal.
Good for you back in the 60s and
But in the
70s.
I made
60s
$6 in 1978, and that would be the equivalent to $23 an hour now.
Right.
But I'm not going to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, do you guys have any sense of inflation? You've been there, right? Like, or cars is just at $40,000 back then too? No? Oh, I wonder why. Is there something called math? But anyway, I have a lot more sympathy for parents. And as far as the patrons, oh, of course I do, right? But as far as the patrons go, it's like, oh, I can't believe like the parents don't take care of their kids better. But I'm also not going to, as a society, give them any fucking tools to do it.
That is.
And it's like, I am going to constantly vote against levies for schools to make sure that this education system is decent. I'm going to constantly vote against their best interests because fuck them. But then when they enter society and they join and I intersect at those small times that I do, and I'm going to be like, fuck those kids, or fuck those parents, they made that choice, right? It's like, wait a minute here. You do realize that you do need to have a certain level baseline population to make the society continue to go, right? Or you import kids or import people, really. And that's fine too. But like, you can't have your cake and eat it.
Not according to the Republicans, but yeah.
Like,
But no,
they
you're
have
right.
their
You can't-
cake, they deny they ate it after you see them eat it off their plate.
well, it's maddening because they're like, well, we need more, they won't say it this way, but America does have a shortage of people just like Europe does. But we don't see that effect because we let so many immigrants in. But if we had tight border controls or like immigration policies, I should say, like South Korea or Taiwan or Japan, we would have numbers similar to those that cannot repopulate.
I am all for throwing money into better healthcare, better childcare, better any of that. I have consistently voted for I've even voted for higher taxes to pay for better resources for our education, like in our district, even though I don't have kids. Because I am one of the few people without children who recognize that they're still important. You know, like, you can't just ignore them. They're not little beasts to be, you know, seen and not heard kind of thing. Like, that's not really what I'm saying here. I'm just, I would vote. I would be one of those few people who would vote on those issues to improve those lives, to make it so parents could have the bandwidth to spend time with their kids and have consistent routine dinners and spend time, like, because I don't know, like, I was reading an article about French mother or parents and their children. They don't have the same issues as we do here in America because they have just better health care, better child care, better support for their parents, basically. And I think that that's part of it, is like, people take the time and have the time. They can afford the time to take care of their kids and teach them manners and teach them how to behave in public. And yes, I have some sympathy for parents who in America just don't have that bandwidth and they're just tired all the time and they just can't, like, they just cannot. I think you can, like, kids are not stupid all the time. Like, you can teach them. You might have to wait for a few years, right, to enjoy the restaurant again, but I'm sorry, I don't want to sit and listen to your child have a meltdown for 10 minutes. Take them out for like 5, okay?
Kids are stupid all the time, period. That's just a point of fact.
That's not true. I've known plenty of kids who are smart.
They were still stupid, period.
I like Phil and the
yes,
editors.
but they still lack a lot of intelligence that falls them under the umbrella of stupid.
And I'm sure they're shit sometimes, but like, they're pretty okay.
Your grievance is more so a dissolution of the identity of the family and the consequences thereof.
My grievance is I want to enjoy a meal out and I can't when there's a child screaming in the background.
Because the societal issue of not having proper education on how to interact in a public place.
It could be a societal issue, or it could just be
have the freedom to instill those
manners. I don't think it's always a societal issue. I think it can be, and yes,
I think the argument you're making is a societal issue.
But because
you have empathy, but they need to do a thing, but they don't have the means to do a thing, so they shouldn't do this thing. That means
they also chose to have children. Generally, they did choose that path. They did.
Yeah, no, it's God's magical gift. All right, there's no agency from any human being. A child is just God's gift, because that was the time God was like, ding, your angel gets
except for when you have to get in vitro fertilization, in which case
hey, we don't talk about the devil's work here. All right, this is a pro-Christian podcast.
So as a pro-Christian podcast, what when do we become a pro-Christian? Okay, my thought too here is that I think just yesterday my 2-year-old corrected me because I said, hey, grab that sweater. And she's like, don't you mean shirt? And I'm like, and then editor started laughing. He's like, she's 2 years old and she's already correcting you. How does that make you feel? I'm like, not great.
Not great. No, are you kidding me? You are the best dad at this point when a 2-year-old is correcting you.
It reminds me of the joke, you're so stupid that your 4-year-old taught you everything you know. Like,
also, slight aside, not to diminish editor's contribution, but, gotta support Phil here.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the support. The idea, though, of like, you had your kid, so deal with the consequences. There is a limit.
Oh, in your own home. Fucking go for it. You can do whatever you want in your own home, but fucking to a privately owned establishment, different.
No,
you can instill all the bad habits at home you want, but when you're in public, don't you dare show those bad habits.
No, I mean, you can't go anywhere. You're in your house. Your child's having a meltdown. You can't just take him out of that situation, really. Like, you kind of can, but not really.
So again, it's a punishment upon the parents for the child's activities that are, as we've established...
It's not a fucking punishment.
You are having them vacate where they are actual patrons. That is a punishment.
Yeah, because it's fucking humiliating.
Because the kid's there, what's the difference if they're, drunk and belligerent?
What's more punishing? Having to sit and endure the humiliation of your child having a meltdown in public? Or just taking them out of the situation?
As a self-admitted child who had a meltdown in public, I would expect a bit more empathy from the parental who has no impact or any actual carry with someone who's having a meltdown in a public situation.
I don't think I followed any of that. Sorry, I think.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
but you said you had a meltdown.
My mother took me. Yep.
Your mother did a thing. So.
Yep, she took me out to the car and we stopped.
Correct. That was an action that was instilled in you as a young age. But if your mother did not do that and you still had that meltdown, would you have more or less empathy for parents who are dealing with their children having a meltdown in a public situation?
I don't remember that instance. This was told to me by my mother. So honestly, I don't think it
So
has
this
any
is a
impact
legend.
on.
But it's become a forced
This is a
memory because
legend.
you're bringing
This
it up
could
as
be a
proof
lie.
of something.
It's not a memory. I'm going by my
It's a
mother's
reported
account.
event
I
by
had a
one witness.
It's a reported event, but it's hearsay.
It's a reported event by a trusted source. So
It's
maybe
hearsay by
your
a trusted
mom
source,
spent
by a
a half
witness.
hour of you crying until she brought you out to the car.
I don't know how
have
long
the proper
she waited,
information.
but
I feel more investigation is needed.
More
Judge,
investigation
I would
is
request
needed.
more time for discovery.
We need to have the witness come to the stand.
Get Barb.
no, let's just take it as I started screaming in the middle of a store or something, and she was like, "Okay, well, we're done here," and then she took me out.
But I also think a store is different than a restaurant.
That's true. You can't just like dine and dash kind of
Right.
thing. So you do have to like pay your
As
tab
the
if
kid
you've
is.
had drinks and stuff. Yeah, and so like that could be a challenge. But at the same time, it's like you could also just say, "Hey, waiter, like please just hold my table. I'm gonna take my kid to the bathroom for like 5 minutes, and we're just gonna like try to calm down, or outside to the car for a few minutes." And like that might be okay, but I don't know. Like I guess it would just it would be situational. But I also don't think the rest of the patrons need to suffer through this extensively. Like, yes, I think like, okay, you know what, like if this kid is going on for like 3 minutes or whatever, like you can understand like, okay, this is just, out of our control. But like if it's going on and it's been like 20 minutes and this kid still hasn't shut the fuck up and no one has come over and tried to help, or this parent has decided to just be like, nope, we're just gonna sit here, we're gonna ignore our child and pretend it's not happening. Fuck that parent. Fuck that parent.
I have a final elucidatory point. Is not experiencing that type of situation in a public place also educational upon those not directly experiencing it? It can
makes me
then be
never
a
want to
societal
have a child.
self-correction
That is
where
true.
60 patrons at that
I don't know if
Applebee's
it's a
in Des Moines,
No, it's not a
Iowa, can throughout all of their different, probably never interacting lives again, will be like December 3rd, 2022. That
We are
fucking
never having children.
kid.
Or
I'm never going
the
to
children we
Applebee's
have.
again. Let me tell you, Des Moines, Iowa, worst place to go to an Applebee's. One kid,
I don't know. I've been to some pretty
37
terrible
minutes.
ones,
I timed
up
it.
in
I
St. Paul
timed it.
there.
37 minutes he yelled. But yet 60 different people that affect how many different people they interact with in their life can now have this cautionary tale for potential future parents that maybe you shouldn't allow your kid to cry for 20 minutes at an Applebee's.
Or it's good birth control. We'll just not have kids. Or
We're in a pandemic. We're having a mini baby boom right now. So
that's fucking true.
Yeah.
Or they will say like, "Oh, I'm not going to be that parent," or "I'm going to try not to be that parent," and here's what I'm going to do in the future.
So that cautionary
if
tale of a small time, in relatively speaking, of experience.
But, like, you gotta, but like that's I don't know. Like I just think people should have a fucking plan, right? When they go out to a restaurant and they have like a small child and they want to bring their child with them because they don't want to hire a babysitter, or they can't hire a babysitter because it's fucking expensive.
So all these stipulations,
They should have a fucking plan.
Does
They
that
should have a
mean
plan.
that person who's going to bring their child to that restaurant is a plan-making person?
Well, I would hope, but you know what hope is.
Shit in one hand.
Shit
hope
in
another.
one hand, hope in the other. Wishes in the other. Yeah, we've talked about that before.
No, again, it depends on the kid too. It's not always going to be 100% success rate that the restaurant's going to be fine.
Bad days can also happen, which is why you
Yep.
just have to let it happen, and that there should
you
not be
can let it
punitive
happen, but
damage.
you can mitigate the effect it has on the other people who are trying to enjoy the dinner.
You can hope, and you can only do that through cautionary tales, because if somebody's
I'm
sitting
not-
down
no,
and paying money for
I'm
food,
sorry,
they have
if-
a right to be there, regardless what their actions are. Unless it's,
No, they do not.
86
They
worthy.
do not. They do not have a right to be there if they're asked to leave or asked to do something about their behavior. Say it's a fucking 30-year-old who's throwing a fit. Say it's a fucking Karen, all right? And he's had a day. And he's like, I want to
I
speak
think
to
that's
your
a
manager.
dub, actually, if we're going to be properly
Whatever.
proper gender these things.
No, they can be escorted off the premises, and I would not have an issue with that. That is not the same
But
thing.
that should happen for a 3-year-old who's just having a bad day. But this is the one
Nope,
day
I think
in a month
there's some
that the family can go out and enjoy this dinner.
One failure, and you
So
just have
everyone
to
should be
try again
judged
next
on
time.
their worst day then. That's what you're saying.
One failure, and you just try again the next time. You just call today not a success, and we'll just try again.
One strike you're out, but there's the next at-bat.
It's not like one strike. Like, you can take a kid out and take them for like 3 minutes to calm down. They can come back to the table and behave. Or if they just refuse and they're going on and on for fucking 20 minutes, then yeah, it's time to fucking leave, okay? This is not, get the fuck out of here. I want to enjoy my meal.
I'm just going to say that each kid is different too.
That too. Kids are different.
Like
babies
are different. But for those that are like special needs children, you're basically saying, hey, don't come here because there's a higher chance than 5 out of 6 because you're.
It's very exclusionary.
Yeah.
So my aunt and my cousin is special needs, and yes, she will sometimes throw a fit in a restaurant. But what my aunt does is she just removes her child from the situation because it's clearly upsetting to her. So she pays her bill and leaves when they're done. They have a plan in place to, but they still are able to go out to eat. Like, they can still do these things as a family. But if you hit the wrong button or whatever, like once, and she is not happy and she's just like, nope, not having it today, then that day is just write off as a failure. We'll try again next time. Like, you have to have a plan, especially when you have kids with special needs, especially when they have autism or something of that sort. Like, you have to be aware that this is a real possibility for your kid, and you're not going to just sit there and let your kid scream and cry. They're clearly in distress. You don't want to keep them in that situation. No one else is enjoying this. Take them out of the situation.
Yeah, in Minnesota is tricky because there's no like separate area where you can easily take them to, like a bathroom. Like, that is not exactly the best spot. And outside is usually very cold for 8 months
in the winter.
Of the year.
Doesn't always work.
But I do agree that, like, if you're the type of parent that's just going to let the kid like cry it out against the wishes of everyone else that's like trying to eat peacefully, it's kind of an asshole move.
It's self-absorbed. It's no, go do this at home.
But at the same,
you suffer with your own choices. Don't make everyone else.
At the same time, like, I'm not gonna expect that, like, because my child we have techniques, or we try to like remind our children that if you're upset, to do these things like deep breathing or something like that. Or the editor has lots of other tactics that she could employ. But I don't think all parents are gonna have that. And maybe it won't work for their kid, or maybe their kid just doesn't respond that way. I've grown to be a lot more empathetic because I understand the struggles of the parents. Are probably tired, they have no energy, and they're still trying to survive and still try to have like a normal, nice type of food event. The alternative is that like the parents never try and they don't eat out, and then you could say something like, oh well, let's just take them out. Like, maybe that might work in better environments, but in Minnesota it's not always an option. And again, to like cut your day and then to be like, okay, well, we're not going to enjoy the rest of this meal, we're just going to leave, is again kind of if you have the resources to do that, that's fine, but I'm not sure everyone just could. And again, I don't think,
like, what do you mean?
To be like, I'm just going to pay this bill, I'm not going to pick up this food, we just have to go now. It's like, well, that's actually that's not an easy thing for many people to do.
If you can't afford it, you shouldn't be doing that in the first place. Like, I shouldn't say it quite like that.
This is America. Doing things you aren't supposed to do is kind of what we're built on.
Yeah.
But like, I guess I'm saying, like, if this is something that's like a special treat for your family because you can't afford it very often and it was a failure this time, yeah, I can understand the desire to like want to stick it out. You can still get your food. But
that's not the experience you're going for. You're not going there to get the food.
You're not going there to experience. Yeah, but you're not going there to experience your child having a fucking meltdown.
But that's something you can't plan for. If you can only go out once a month and just your kid has a meltdown, that's not going to stop your once a month thing.
It would though. It would if you're not a fucking asshole. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that is not the experience anyone signed up for.
Correct,
no one signed up for that experience, including you, who brought your child who had a meltdown.
There's also the hope that the parent can turn the ship around too. It's not like the parent's expecting to say, okay, for 25 minutes this kid's gonna cry. I think in that case, if you knew it in hindsight, you would have probably done things differently. But like, there are things that the parents could try to do to be like, okay, well, maybe this will work, maybe that will work.
But
you also, don't have to, I'm not saying it's an immediate thing.
The 20 minutes the kid is crying, they turn the corner, and the kid is fine for the next hour.
Right.
Are you damning their hour of enjoyment of their night
ruined,
out
but
for
you
20
definitely
minutes?
You definitely ruined like half the patrons
Is it ruined?
who were already eating.
If it stopped?
Yeah, it would be fucking ruined. I don't want to listen to a child screaming during my meal. Sorry. If you're
So you as
like
an
5 minutes
outside patron aren't going to chalk that up as an anecdote that you can complain about later of why you don't like having kids in restaurants, and you just bear with it, but still have a net
I don't mind
positive
kids in
evening.
restaurants. I don't mind kids in restaurants if they're well behaved and aren't screaming.
It's the empathy of dealing with the
Or
situation
running
when
around
they are
and
screaming.
putting their gross.
It's
for
having
5
empathy
minutes.
for the shitty situations is what I'm digging at.
For fucking 5 minutes, I can have empathy, right? But after 5 minutes of this child screaming, clearly not calming down, and the parents, they can try, like, hey, like, it's okay, like, they can try for 5 minutes, but if it's, like, fucking not, if that kid is just, like, not having it, and they are just determined to
have it their way,
exercise their lungs and have it their way, and this parent is like, this is just not working. Then that parent should be like, hey, waiter, could you just get our tab, and, like, we'll take the food, and we're just gonna, go outside in the car, and we'll wait. We'll try again next month or next week or whatever. Like, sometimes it's just not going to work out, and that's okay, but don't ruin everyone else's experience as well. 20 minutes of crying. 5 minutes, okay. I have empathy for that.
My final point about this. You are a big proponent of the term, I have sowed my field of fucks and I am out of fucks to give.
Yeah. Well, I didn't coin that, but...
I said you're a fan.
I am a fan of it, yes. Okay.
Who has less fucks to give in that restaurant situation of the parent of a child who's having a tantrum or someone not affiliated listening to a child having a tantrum?
I don't know. I don't know their lives.
I'm going to be guessing that the parent has less fucks to give, right?
Ding!
Yeah, well, you know what? They can take their fucks, their limited fucks, and fuck right off. Is what
right,
I
but if
say.
like
sorry,
yeah, but they don't have
your
fucks to give for your
fucklessness.
fucking right off, so they're gonna do what they're gonna do anyway because they're a patron at a restaurant.
Then that restaurant's gonna lose several other patrons when that restaurant decides to let this child scream for 20 minutes, and those patrons are never gonna come back because clearly this is allowed, and they're gonna be like, nope, we're gonna go somewhere else.
Restaurants and that Applebee's won't care.
Yeah, most restaurants are not going to kick out a parent with kids because it's a bad look.
Yeah.
Right? Can you imagine that? Like,
it is a bad look.
Actually, it could be the other way around here.
Depends on the restaurant.
If the restaurant owner says, "Hey, you need to leave this restaurant. Your kid is too loud," and then there's people who don't mind the kid because they had kids at one time and they remember that time, they would be like,
and they can tune it out.
Excuse me, what
like,
the fuck are you doing here?
Get it.
They're paying customers. Like, don't you have any concept that the kid is a kid? Like, you know what? Why don't you go fuck yourself? Like, I would actually be upset if it was the other way around. If they're kicking out a parent and the was crying for 7 minutes and they just said, just get up and leave. I would actually stand up like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that is...
And I would agree. You can't, like, it should be the parent who takes the child out of the situation, not the...
But you were saying the establishment should step in and stop such... outrageous.
Not necessarily. No.
In this case, the establishment is not going to ever make that move because they would probably assume that the patrons around them that would leave. Fine, who cares? But there would be more, like, the offense the other way around is very severe. If I were if I had to stand up and say,
especially for other people who are parents and would be like, oh, fuck that noise, like,
yeah, I would like be militia, like I would band up and be like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what the
and parents are fierce as fuck, man. They will ruin your business.
So they're
with that kind of, so yes.
So most restaurants are going to be like, well, I guess we're fucked, right? You know, and if all restaurants do that, then the patron who says, you know what, I don't like this screaming child, that's totally reasonable. I'm not going to come back here because there's always a screaming child here. And then they keep going to restaurants, there's always a fucking screaming child there. It's like the airport problem all over again. It's just, guess what? There's just going to be screaming children everywhere. If you want to fix that problem, why don't you raise a fucking minimum wage and give them healthcare, you assholes?
Well, or just, unfortunately, what really ends up happening is that people who don't have kids just don't go out to eat anymore. Or they go to places where it's clearly not child-friendly, like a bar, at 9. You know?
And that's...
at night, when kids are in bed and they're not necessarily...
Or they go to a nice, like a really expensive restaurant.
Or a really expensive restaurant where it's like, this is clearly like date night, and
wait,
like
so,
that's the kind of...
So you're saying a prime rib shouldn't cost $80?
Oh, God.
What kind of prime rib are you eating? It should be at least 100.
Oh shit!
You're going to
yeah.
those
All right. So next time
peasant
I'm gonna pay
prime ribs.
120.
Yes. That's
At
how
any
the math
rate,
works.
I do have some empathy, and I do think there should be some like allowance of like, yeah, okay, you can give a parent and a child a chance to like turn their stuff around, but like if your baby or your toddler has been crying for like 10 minutes, you don't necessarily have to leave, but just take the kid out for a minute if you can. I don't know. Like I would just like something to be done rather than just sitting and letting them cry it out. Because like I can guarantee you, if I have not been back to that Mexican restaurant, that was an experience that I'm just like, you know what, I'm not coming here.
But
again.
it could be a case where it could happen anytime, not just at that place, right?
That's
like,
true, and this is also another reason why I don't go out to eat very
Right,
often.
right.
I'm just like I can't do it. I cannot do it. It's too annoying to me personally. I can't tune it out like parents can.
Yeah, I don't think it bothers me anymore.
No, you learn to tune that shit out.
It doesn't even register. When I used to travel a lot, it's just me. I would like just be like, I don't have to take care of anybody. I don't have to have an extra bag to have snacks. It's just me. It feels like any flight is first class. Like it just feels great and fantastic. And even if I'm like in a little shoebox chair, it's like, I don't care. This is just great. And then the plane is, I'm sorry, we're going to be delayed for 2 hours before the plane arrives in this gate.
I don't even care. It's 2 hours of peace where I don't have to worry about it.
I can turn on my Wi-Fi now.
Yep, it's good. Just I can read this book longer at my own leisure and buy another cup of coffee. Everything is great. And when I see parents that have kids and the kids are on meltdown at the gate, I feel really bad for them.
No, I feel bad, and like there's nothing you can do, like especially on a plane. There's really nothing you can do. I think it's like amazing when like a flight attendant will be like, hey, you know, because they'll try their best to like calm the situation down and you know like say, hey, would you like to come, you know, walk up and down or maybe come back to the back or whatever, and like I think people understand like if there's no out, you're trapped in a steel box
tube of death.
like there's just you gotta deal with it.
So
it sucks, but you know what, that's why you make child-free flights and people pay a premium for them, right?
I think first class is that. Like, I just don't see a lot of families that have.
This is true.
But maybe I'm wrong because
I've seen a lot of rich kids in first class.
Oh god, that's terrible.
It's like 9-year-olds sitting in a chair that like is a beanbag chair to them because it's so big.
9-year-olds are typically good though, right?
Yeah. They're 9-year-olds. Like they might be little assholes, but they're not going to be screaming necessarily.
I still think children are 22, so age to me is a very broad spectrum.
Children are
9 is very young.
We're all just big. We're all just big children. We're all
isn't that true?
Wait, have I showed you my next Superman's Rembrandt? I got it all within the lines.
And with all of that, dear audience, dear listeners, I think we're going to have to put a pin in that. Yeah, sorry about all that. Thanks, Mom.
And thanks, Mom, for taking me to restaurants when I was a kid. I really enjoyed them.
Thanks, Mom, for owning a restaurant when I was a kid.
What?
Suck it!
Why did we talk about this? Next time.
All right.
I already stopped recording.
Yeah, all right.